Anthony Albanese, he's going to meet China's Xi Jinping today, and there is much to discuss, notably trade, but there will no doubt be sticking points. A proposed sale of the Port of Darwin amongst them. National Senator Matt Canavan, he joins us now live. Good morning to you, Matt. So would a sale of the Port of Darwin, I know this has been said by some, do you think it could trigger some Chinese retaliation?
Well, look, obviously I hope not, Peter, but the form here has not been great in the past few years. We saw a decade of retaliation, really, from the Chinese Communist Party on Australian government's legitimate, independent and sovereign actions. This started when Malcolm Turnbull, people forget now, but Malcolm Turnbull rightly pushed foreign interference laws in Australia, make sure that we couldn't have outside political actors trying to influence our elections. China didn't like that. They then didn't like the fact that we said no, we wouldn't be letting Huawei build our 5G network. We're the first country in the world to say that. Now almost every other Western developed country has said the same. And after that, there was a series of retaliations. We all remember now the ones after COVID, but that came a bit later. So I hope the Chinese government doesn't resort to that. Ultimately, thankfully for the Australia had a strong Liberal National government that stood up to China. And the result of its sanctions was clearly much worse for its own country than Australia. We were able to sell our coal, our barley, other products to other countries, and China at the time had a massive power shortages because they weren't buying our energy resources. So, look, I'm not sure they will revert to a failed strategy, despite the threats we see in some aspects of their media, but I certainly hope the Prime Minister keeps his commitment to the Australian people to bring the Darwin port back to Australian hands.
So if that's aside, what would you like to come out of the Prime Minister's meeting today with Xi Jinping? What sort of extraction, if any, would you hope that we get?
Well, look, I can't guarantee any kind of extraction, but one thing that is not getting enough airplay that I'd like to see raised is the protection of over 6,000 manufacturing workers in this country. We've already seen the aggressive industrial tactics of China in Indonesia. They're financing coal-fired power stations and nickel expansions in Indonesia. That cost 10,000 Australian jobs last year when our nickel industry effectively went kaput thanks to those tactics. We're now seeing similar things play out in copper, in lead, in zinc and aluminium, where the Chinese government takes in a very aggressive expansion of these key industrial commodities at the expense of jobs and industry in other countries. Now, in my view, those actions, the actions of the Chinese government, are clearly in breach of their international trade commitments. And it sort of perplexes me why no one's raising this. We're all talking about this green steel and all this stuff that's not working.
Yeah.
How about somebody in this country raise their voice for the workers that we currently have that have their jobs at risk? The Australian Workers' Union have been saying this in the past week. I don't understand why the Labor Party can't stand up for good union jobs in our aluminium smelters, in our lead smelters, in our copper refineries. No one is talking about this. Why isn't this being raised with the Chinese government, who are clearly putting at risk thousands of Australian livelihoods?
Just on green steel, Matt, Twiggy Forrest, he's on that tour. He's there in China at the moment. There was that round table involving Aussie miners and Chinese steelmakers yesterday, and both he and the PM there spruiking green steel. Let's just play part of this yesterday.
I asked our Prime Minister if he could work together with China to form a bilateral agreement where we escape the threats coming from AI to employment, both in China and Australia, and generate a serious jobs boom.
Okay, so aside there from green steel, he's moving to AI, but your thoughts on what they can achieve and those business leaders?
Well, I give credit to the Chinese officials and business leaders for keeping a straight face. I mean, China, in the last 3 years, China has increased its coal mining output by 654 million tonnes a year. That's the increase. It's not their total. They produce now about 6 billion tonnes of coal a year. They've increased it by 654 million tonnes the last 3 years. That 3 years is since they so-called signed up to net zero emissions. Now, we produce, to put that figure in context, we produce about 450 million tonnes of coal a year. The Adani mine that was so controversial in this country produces about 10 million tonnes a year. So that 654 million tonne increase means China has effectively opened 654 Adanis, in just 3 years.
Yeah.
It's absolutely absurd. And then we crap on about green steel. I mean, the Prime Minister should come and visit Gladstone, not Beijing, because in Gladstone, his government has wasted $90 million of taxpayer money on hydrogen, which has not worked. It's a complete white elephant. It's Twiggy's investment. No one is there anymore. Come and see the real impacts of this ridiculous obsession we have with green steel while we ignore the fact that over 6,000 factory workers have their jobs at risk right now.
Still on the climate, and we'll close out with this one, Matt. The Chamber of Commerce, it's got its pitch for the upcoming Economic Reform Roundtable, so it'll argue that Labor's 43% 2030 target is out of reach. It initially supported it, remember, and a new goal is needed to be realistic. A new goal hasn't been identified, but your thoughts on the Chamber's pitch today?
Well, look, I think the penny's dropping here on net zero, and finally some people are waking up. Of course, the Business Council themselves were out there spruiking these ridiculous targets years ago, but I'm glad they're finally seeing the light. We clearly are not going to meet these targets, and I suppose the trick of governments is when they're not meeting one target, they'll set another target further in the future, which they can't be held accountable for. That seems to be the three-card trick here of the Labor Party. Rather than focus on the target ahead of them in 2030, which they're not going to meet, they're now going to set an even greater and bigger target, which they're not going to be around for in 2035 or 40 or whenever it might be. Look, I hope the Australian people are seeing through this, because this net zero obsession is the principal reason why productivity is in the slumps. It's clearly the reason why electricity prices have risen 31% since we signed up to net zero, and gas prices have risen at 39%. That's on top of already major increases over the past couple of decades as we obsessed about this green energy scam. And I think the Australian people have had enough of this. They have had enough of paying high bills, high electricity bills. It's flowing through to food prices now. The cost of everything is going up. Why don't we focus on using our energy resources again? Why don't we focus on a target of reducing the cost of living in Australia before we focus on a target of reducing Australia's emissions, which are barely anything of global emissions in any case.
1%, yeah, not much at all. Thank you, Matt. We're going to shuffle off.